Hi, everyone. We're going to let people sort of join for another minute or so, and then we can begin. Okay, everyone. Welcome to today's panel discussion on the women, peace, and security lens in Armenia and Artsakh. I'm Gayane Khechoomian. I'm the co-chair of the Armenian Women's Bar Association. And today we're going to discuss women's role and challenges in the peace and security of Armenia and the crisis in Artsakh. And we're here today with international experts from all over the world to give you their unique insights into this topic. I want to also thank the Promise Institute for Human Rights at UCLA for co-sponsoring this event and for the important work they do for human rights everywhere. I'm based in Los Angeles, so good morning to all my fellow colleagues from the West Coast of the United States. Good afternoon and good evening to everyone else. So I've worked in a few international criminal tribunals in The Hague and in Cambodia, so I'm particularly excited to be able to moderate today because we have panelists today that are truly leading experts in their field, and they are doing currently impactful work on the ground. So I know that they'll have a lot of insight for you on this topic, and their work is really interesting. And just to give you the format for today, first I'll introduce the topic briefly, and then I'll introduce each panelist who will take a few minutes to speak on their work and this topic before we get into a discussion with everyone. You can submit questions in the Q&A, and hopefully we'll get to all of them. And I hope that we'll end with some recommendations on how to go forward. So why this topic? Well, women in peace and security, it's a global topic on which the United Nations has passed a number of resolutions on. It's a topic that Armenia has implemented not one, but two national action plans. Yet there's an issue when it comes to women's participation in decision-making levels of government institutions and mechanisms. So as Armenia is dealing with so many things, you know, displaced persons from Artsakh, with prisoners of war, with legal battles in international courts, attacks from their neighbors, it's important to explore how increased participation of women will actually strengthen and help peace and security in Armenia. So that's the premise that I have for you today. And I hope that today's discussion will inspire some positive change. And I know that today's panelists will go into the topic a little more deeply from their very unique lens. So without further ado, I want to introduce our first panelist. Her name is Gulnara Shahinian. She's with us from Yerevan, Armenia today. Gulnara is a legal expert with over 20 years of experience in international law, human rights, gender equality. She's the founder of the NGO Democracy Today Armenia. She's authored a number of publications, the most relevant for today being Women, Peace and Security in Action in Armenia. She has served as the UN Special Rapporteur on Contemporary Forms of Slavery and as the first president of the Council of Europe's Committee on Action Against Trafficking in Human Beings. She's worked as an expert to a number of UN organs and has had her recommendations on slavery and forced labor implemented by a number of governments, including Brazil, Ecuador, Peru, Kazakhstan. So we are very fortunate to have Gulnara with us today for her insights, among other things, on Armenia's National Action Plan on Women's Security, Women, Peace and Security. So thank you for being here, Gulnara. I'm so sorry. I think you need to unmute.
Yes. Thank you very much. Good afternoon to everybody. It's a real pleasure to be on such important panel with such extremely known panelist. Sometimes I feel myself very shy, but I also learned about myself when we're presenting. I didn't know myself so much. So I'm very happy to be here and to be discussing this issue. You know, when we speak about women, peace and security, it seems like, this resolution is 24 years old. But I think in Armenia, it has been a document. It has been a process that has been established just after independence. Women have been participating in strengthening democracy in Armenia on many levels, meeting in prevention, organizing meetings on the regional level, meeting with counterparts, talking to colleagues in Azerbaijan and Georgia, trying to smoothen situation, working with refugees, working with on the border communities with women, trying to establish human security elements. I think this resolution was with us for a long time. And indeed, this resolution was inspired by civil society. It is not just a deliberation on the, between the government, but this is unique resolution in that sense. And I know that Armenian women have been invested a lot in making this resolution happen. But the process doesn't finish here. Very recently, I've been doing research with young women who are in army, because there were a lot said that Armenia has now is militarized, has been taking young women into army. And we decided to interview young women about their attitudes, why they joined the army. What they have said was very unique. They said, we speak about our rights. Being in army is our responsibility to protect our country. That was fantastic. And that was very important that they feel like that, young women. Yes, resolution, 1325, and it has also number of, they always say sister resolutions, 8 sister resolutions. We speak about, women's role. 4 of them speak about women's role in the conflict resolution, in building human security. The other 4 resolutions speak about the protection of women during the conflict, and the last one about hate speech, which is really very important in our environment, the new one. So they're interesting set of documents. And what is extremely, for me, what was important in this, 1325, is that it broke a barrier between women's issues and international peace and security. It put it's an essential first step in normativizing and establishing new norms on protection of women during conflict. And if you see, there has been a resolution, recommendation 30 of Convention on Elimination of all forms of violence against women, which has already a new language. And this new language have been introduced in many of the set of resolutions, in 4 resolutions. This is very important step. The resolution is also important in a way that women are not seen as passive, victims of the conflict. Their role is very much stressed in this resolution, and governments are required to support it. So resolution also requires states to develop institutional mechanism, to develop committee to run this, action and develop action plan. So again, in Armenia, we are coming to a unique process that if the first plan of action that Armenia has developed was, based very shyly on 4 pillars that resolution is developed of, and it was just after Velvet Revolution in 19. The second plan of action goes beyond these barriers. It introduces more and more, actions, more and more policy directions that are very important for Armenia now. What is critically important in this process also that, first of all, they established a commission on, monitoring and implementation of action plan. For the first time, Armenia has provided civil society not as an observer status, but as an active status. Even further, Armenia has established monitoring commission where NGOs are equally, responsible for monitoring implementation of the convention. This is very interesting process that Armenia has gone. Another element which I really liked when convention has been established, again, it's went beyond the pillars, but it also established a new type of mechanism as a living document. Because resolution has been established at a time where there was war. It's just after the war. And a resolution wanted to be inclusive to all the situations that might be emerging, that might be taking place in Armenia in order to address it. That was very important. Second element, which was also important, resolution has been, Armenian plan of action has been established in the result of numerous discussions with women at the border, with refugee women, with women who, brought many approaches to making this resolution real document for people, for women, not just a document that has been prepared by the government, but document that corresponds to the needs of women. That was, again, one of the most important. Again, it is based on legal history of Armenia. All the documents that Armenia has adopted in relation to women, peace and women's rights are part of this, package. By the way, again, I want to say that during the Armenia has been very proactive during the democratic times. First document, Convention on Elimination of Forms of Violence, CEDAW, has been adopted just after independence. And this also, I think, acceptance of a second plan of action being the most open, even after the war, when situation was very critical, it speaks about political will of the government to introduce women's rights. Of course, there are numerous elements. I don't know whether I have time to go through, but this is a very interesting document. It introduces a new element, like, it's cooperation with international community, genocide, as a prevention diplomacy, education of genocide and prevention of diplomacy, inclusion of all issues related to refugees, displaced people, women at the border. Of course, strong element is, women in police and defense sector. This is also an issue which needs to be discussed, and it is in a process of discussion. It's also there, inclusion of strengthening participation of women in diplomacy, which again needs to be done while when we speak about women in law enforcement. There is a very important process established. There are new laws introduced and new programs taking place. While with diplomacy, I would not say there is so much done, and we need to do a lot in that area. What is also, I would say, interesting, that Armenia doesn't see resolution, as many countries have seen from the very beginning, as a security document only. It introduces also elements of human security, which are critically important for the country such as Armenia. You know, protection from the fear and protection from want. All of these elements are introduced in the elements of resolution. That's a critical, you know, but very soon in 2024, there has to be a monitoring process established how the resolution have been implemented. And we need to see whether all of the elements which we planned that should strengthen women's participation, you know, in peace process would be really, you know, strongly implemented. So, okay, I'll start. Yeah, I have still a couple of minutes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Gulnara. Thank you for that, and I hope that we get deeper into discussion on those topics. Our next panelist is Sossi Tatikyan. She's with us from Paris, France. So good afternoon to her. Sossi is a consultant on public, foreign, and security policy and governance. She's a PhD researcher at Sorbonne Nouvelle University in Paris. She has served over 12 years as an Armenian diplomat representing Armenia in NATO, at the UN Office on Drugs and Crime, at the International Atomic Energy Agency, and at the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons. She has worked in the OSCE and as a UN peacekeeper in Europe, Asia, and Africa. And she is a member of the UN Senior Women Talent Pipeline, and she currently teaches leadership at the American University in Armenia. And she still had time to be with us today. I think we can look forward to her insights, particularly on the type and lack of representation of women in peace and security. So thank you so much for being with us today, Sossi.
Thank you so much for inviting me to this panel with this amazing group of women and on a very important topic for Armenia. You know, from the first glance, the women participation in peace and security may not seem so important given the Armenian traditional thinking and given the very severe security challenges that Armenia is facing now. People may think that it's not an important issue when Armenia is facing real hard security challenges. When with the loss of Artsakh, Nagorno-Karabakh, with ethnic cleansing there, with our territory being subjected to military aggression and annexation by Azerbaijan. However, that's exactly why the role of women is so important in Armenia, and we should advance it more. Why? Because first of all, women are very sensitive on human security issues, and they are very human-centric, and they look at security very much from the human rights perspective, which doesn't mean that women are what is called just for pacifistic notion and disarmament and demilitarization. That's one of the prejudices about women's role in peace and security, which I don't share. I would say that it's the opposite. Women are sensitive on being ready for a possible military aggression and attack, because if this attack happens, first of all, it's children, fathers, husbands, brothers are going to go to the army and serve there and possibly sacrifice their life. That's why, for instance, in Armenia, women were very much drawing the attention of the men on border security issues in 2021, 2022, when we thought that the government was not paying enough attention and was just negotiating a peace agreement without doing necessary border security arrangements on the border. And basically, civil society women who were advocating for strengthening border security turned out to be right, because only peace negotiations didn't stop Azerbaijan to continue its creeping annexation and military aggression against Armenia. So women are actually very active in the public life of Armenia. However, mostly it happens either in the civil society, where there are a lot of human rights defenders, civil society activists. We have also security governance experts, including, but not limited to myself. And also women are active in other areas. However, here we should note one particularity, that while women are active in peace and security issues in civil society, they have very little representation at policy-making, at decision-making levels with the government. In particular, there has never been any member of the Security Council, and there has never been any minister. There is only one deputy minister in the Ministry of Interior, which has been just established a few months ago. Now, the first attempt is the new head of the newly establishing external intelligence agency is a woman who is also a former ombudsperson, which is a very interesting aspect, because it means that she will also be sensitive to human rights issues. And for me, as somebody who has served as a security sector reform officer in the UN peacekeeping missions in Kosovo, Central African Republic, East Timor, security governance should not ignore human rights and rule of law issues. It should always be based on the human rights criteria. And if we adopt this human-centric approach, then we will also build our defense institutions, including army, in a way to prevent the war, to be ready for the war with a mindset of preventing it by that. So there wouldn't be human losses when a neighbor is military aggressive and intends to conduct military aggression against you. If you are ready, if you have a strong army, then the enemy will think twice before conducting a military aggression. So now there is a lot of discussion about women's participation in the army. As Gulnara mentioned, women feel obliged to contribute to the security and defense of the country. I have mixed feelings about it, because although I have done a lot of gender mainstreaming in different countries, that's why I know the international criteria for participation of women in the army. And I believe that Armenia should put in place certain criteria for the service of women in the army. In particular, but we can talk about this later, because this is quite detailed. I don't want to talk about particular issues, but basically what I was going to say is that women are represented in policy-making and decision-making levels in Armenia, but not in security sector, more like in traditional female areas like health, education, culture, labor affairs. But when it comes to diplomacy, we have only 1/5 of women ambassadors, and we have never had significant women in the defense sector, and it's just new that we are encouraging women's participation in the police. So we need to look at all those issues to ensure not a declarative approach, not just have women in order to have women, but to make women's participation meaningful, not quantitative, but qualitative, and contributing to the peace and security in the country, and also globally. Thank you.
Those are very good points, and I would love to revisit. So let me introduce the next panelist. We have with us Luciana Minassian. She's with us today from Buenos Aires, Argentina. So it's afternoon for her. She's an assistant professor of international law at the University of Buenos Aires Law School. She's currently working on the legal aspects of the 2020 Artsakh war, specifically on issues concerning prisoners of war, bringing claims by civil parties to the United Nations, to the Council of Europe, writing letters to the Vatican, and so on. She serves as a legal advisor to the International Observatory of Human Rights in Argentina, and she's formerly assistant professor to the legal aspects of the Armenian genocide course and to the chair of Holocaust, Genocides, and Anti-Discrimination at the University of Buenos Aires. So we are lucky to have somebody working with prisoners of war and their families to bring them justice with us today. Thank you, Luciana.
Thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me to such a brilliant panel of women. This is like amazing. I only have some few names left aside of us. I'm sorry to say, but like I'm very, very, very honored. So you were just stressing the question of prisoners of war. So in that sense, we don't have prevention. Like I was thinking, we cannot speak about prevention. We are just trying to figure out how the role of women can be on the consequences. We may also discuss prevention, maybe related to what Sossi was stating before, and also what Gulnara was stating before, based on normatives or whatever. So I'm more related to consequences by now. And I was just like making a list of people who are like in important positions because they could be from the government on one aspect, but on the other aspect, it could be because they are mother of fallen soldiers, mother of prisoners. So if we could make, I don't know, a list, we should be stating, or we should be pointing out a situation of representatives of government, just as Sossi was stating before. I would like to speak about the role of our combatants again, and maybe even paramedics, because these people have been suffering so much, especially just 1 year ago during September 2022 attacks. I would also like to point out roles of journalists that bring a lot of visibility and help us a lot. And I'm not speaking about Armenian journalists specifically, which is also even more important. I would also, as you were presenting me, would like to speak about the role of mothers of fallen soldiers and mothers of prisoners. Those are both very difficult situations, and the way that they are trying to solve their own situations, the ones, of course, with very sad and complex and no solution, mothers of fallen soldiers, and how we can bring visibility in the cases of the mothers of prisoners, because these boys have been there for more than 3 years, and they are facing sentences from 4, 6, 15, and 20 years. And we are not even including the political prisoners of this year. We are just talking about combatants and 3 civilians. And I would also like to state, and something that we have to explore, the role of psychologists, because we are dealing with PTSD, we are dealing with lots of trauma, and during a recent workshop I'm combining these atrocities because prior to, we had Artsakh, we had the blockade, then we have this unfortunate result of having more than 100,000 people displaced. And just on October 7th, we had this situation in Israel, and I have been like involved. I was in July in a workshop in Israel, so I have been involved also with victims of the kibbutz. And also during the workshop, I was trying to figure out how they are treating PTSD. I had the possibilities, and then while we were doing sharing with Sheila, and also I also saw Sossi in October, we had the possibility of discussing with some psychologists of dealing with PTSD in Armenia. So maybe we should also try to navigate through that. I hope this becomes interesting for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Luciana, and for bringing up that topic as well. And then last but not least, our fourth panelist is Sheila Paylan, and she's here from Yerevan, Armenia. Sheila is an international human rights lawyer and a gender expert. She's currently serving on the board of directors of the Armenian Women's Bar, so we are very familiar with her work. After the 2020 Artsakh war, Sheila served as pro bono legal advisor to the Republic of Armenia on Armenia's cases against Azerbaijan before the International Court of Justice and the European Court of Human Rights. She's actually spent more than 15 years advising judges and senior officials of a number of UN-backed international criminal tribunals, including for Rwanda, the former Yugoslavia, and Cambodia. She was appointed in 2019 by the UN Office of High Commissioner for Human Rights to assist the Democratic Republic of Congo with investigating and prosecuting war crimes, crimes against humanity. And she has numerous publications under her belt on all these topics. So we can really look forward to hearing about her work on legal justice in the aftermath of the Artsakh conflict and many other things. So thank you so much, Sheila.
Thank you. It's really a hard act to follow, all these lovely women and so bright. I don't really have anything like substantive much to add other than I think maybe I'll just speak from my experience because, you know, I moved here 3 years ago and I had a big career with the UN and I was sort of part of the women, peace and security agenda in certain roles, especially my very last role. My role was really like sexual and gender-based violence specialist. I was selected to make sure that there was a gender perspective in the work of, you know, Congolese military prosecutors investigating war crimes. And I found coming to Armenia that it was harder to work with Armenian authorities in you know, convincing them to take certain gender perspectives or even just getting them to take me seriously than it was with Congolese military prosecutors. So, you know, of course, like coming here, I didn't have the UN badge on me, but just, it was almost like being a woman made me less credible from the get-go. And that was an experience that I've never really had before. And I realized, you know, there's a lot of work to do. And of course, combined with, although I want to say the very, very first person that welcomed me when I arrived was Sossi, and she took me to lunch. I didn't know anyone here, and well, I knew 2 people here, but she was my first, you know, welcome, and I never met her before. And it was just this beautiful, like, when it's like we see each other, you know, women who know and take care of each other. And there's a lot of that here because it's a tough crowd and it's a really important cause. I mean, when Gulnara mentioned how women take the national security to heart because they want to defend this country, we all do. And it's very difficult to be met often, and even I have, but with like, well, your responsibility is to have children. And it's like, excuse me, that's not appropriate. Like, whatever, you know? So we want to contribute, and we have a lot to contribute, and a lot of women are coming here wanting to contribute, and it shouldn't be the case that we have to climb these really, really high walls when working together. There's so much power. There's so much power and like untapped resources just waiting. We cannot afford to live in this fugue state of, you know, like, now is not the time to talk about gender equality. Like, now is not the time because we have more important things to deal with, like the war. Now is not the time because yesterday and the day before and last year and 10 years ago was the time. Yes, you're right. But, you know, like, we cannot afford to be cutting 50% of the population. So many women are so highly educated. The women I work with here are so damn intelligent, and they don't have decision-making power in the most important places. And it's just, I don't know how else to make it clear that is the problem. Like, that is a huge part of the problem. So I'm really, really grateful to be sharing the panel today with you all, but also to the Armenian Women's Bar Association for making this, because it's actually a tough subject to talk about in Armenia too, you know, like, or among Armenians. Feminism is still taboo. Calling yourself a feminist is like hugely stigmatized. I will tattoo it on my forehead if I have to, you know, like this has to end. And so it's really important that that we come together and normalize what should be taken for granted, like what should already just, we shouldn't even have to talk about it. The fact that we have to talk about it is a problem, but like, we have to talk about it. So that's, I don't know. I had a few more notes, but I feel like it's going to be more interesting to start interacting now. And Sossi has her hand up.
Yes.
So,
Yeah, what Sheila said resonated with me so much that I just want to make a few similar points. That yes, I was actually a security sector reform officer in the UN peacekeeping missions in Africa, dealing with really difficult interlocutors, such as, you know, people who have been involved in wars, civil wars, interethnic wars, who have a rank of a general, but it wasn't as difficult as when I returned to Armenia. However, I should admit that women have some sort of policy shaping role in Armenia. It's more that they are always in the backstage, and I know it from my own experience and from the experience of my friends. For instance, we advocated for the deployment of European Union monitoring mission in Armenia. There were 3-4 people in the civil society who were advocating for it, and 2 of us were women, me and Gayane Abrahamian, who is a very active member of our civil society. And eventually, we convinced both Armenian authorities and also the European Union that this mission was a necessity. Or we were advocating for ratification of Rome Statute for 2-3 years. Sheila, myself, and I have to admit that it wasn't all women, because some of the key advocates were actually men. So it was a mixed crowd. And in general, I don't tend to kind of to say, oh, this is just for women or this is just for men, because I think that we should work together with men. So I don't tend to divide people into men and women. However, when it comes to official positions, women usually don't get it. Usually they are not around the table. They are always in the second line or a note taker, even if they have contributed to policy making for a long time before the actual negotiations. And, you know, this notion that women haven't served in the army, that's why they cannot understand security, is completely false. Because we saw that men ruling the security sector and diplomacy for 3 decades in Armenia could not prevent the war, could not strengthen our defense institutions, security, to an extent that the war wouldn't happen. And even during Nagorno-Karabakh negotiations, there has never been any woman around the negotiation table.
There was one.
I have seen Lilith Makuns, who is our ambassador to the US, that she was present in a couple of recent talks, but I don't think she has an active role. And I don't know whom you mean, Gulnara, to be honest.
Minister of Foreign Affairs of Nagorno-Karabakh.
Ah, okay.
At the very beginning.
Right, that's a fair point. However, women are always, or almost always, in a secondary role. And, you know, this is not about promoting women or promoting ourselves. No, this is when you feel that you can actually contribute to the security governance or diplomacy of the country, but you have a possibility to do it only in the backstage or only as a civil society. And by the way, right now, most of the figures that are very active in public diplomacy for Armenia are again women. Returning to the issue of the service in the army. So in order to ensure proper service in the army, the government should ensure few preconditions, and I believe they are trying, because there have also been projects such as by the Council of Europe promoting the role of women in armed forces and some other organizations. However, I just want to be sure that when women go to serve in the army, they are well protected. And what do I mean by that? The first thing is there should be infrastructure for the service of women in the army. There should be bedrooms, there should be bathrooms. You know, this sounds very basic, but this is an international norm. When I was serving in Central African Republic, we made sure that women military have all those conditions before they would serve. So this is not just a luxury for like Scandinavian countries. This is a norm for any country in the world. The second thing, we have a huge issue in the army, which is bullying, because of which every year several tens of soldiers die or commit suicide or are made to commit suicide. This is one of our main issues in our defense sector. And my concern is that if women go to serve in the army, they may simply not feel protected because there may be some harassment and violence to those women. And, you know, we Armenians tend to think that, oh, those things like sexual violence, gender-based violence don't exist in Armenia because we are the best. Mm-hmm. Those things exist in any country in the world with no exception. And Armenia cannot be an exception. So there is a need to put in place like a code of conduct, strong legal frameworks, and reinforcement mechanisms in order to prevent such phenomenon in the army. Because if women go to the army and this happens, it will be too late. So it's better to prevent them. And by the way, I still haven't heard of any instance about it. So I hope that there will be no any cases like this. And finally, we are in an active conflict situation. And we all know the tragic case when in September 2020, 4 or 5 sniper women, military service women, were caught by Azerbaijanis, and they were tortured, mutilated, stripped naked, filmed, and killed. So this is a big warning sign that women should not be in the front line in Armenia. They should be in less dangerous positions during their military service. And I'm sure that Gulnara and others have a lot to contribute to this. Thank you.
I would like to know, Gulnara, how the National Action Plan has worked to address some of these issues. And then Luciana, you know, you've done a lot of work on these women snipers. And so Gulnara, if you could tell us a little bit about the Armenian National Action Plan and how they have addressed the issues Sossi brought up.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for that. Because, you know, for me, we were already working for a couple of years with Minister of Defense, and I would say that they are very open to cooperation. What is very interesting, we are trying to make sure that the decision that has been made by the Minister of Defense will not be just declarative. Because the young women who went to army, they are heroes. Because they go against trends, social trends, and we need to protect these women, because changing beds, changing you know, their clothing and everything, this is important, but it is more important to change mentality, to change attitude towards women in army, and that is critically important. And that is what we're discussing almost every time, because I'm also having trainings on 1325 in army and in police, and sometimes it's mixed training, and I hear what men are saying. So a lot needs to be invested in changing mentality and attitude towards women. Otherwise, if we do not address it now, we would lose these women. We would lose this important tendency that women are going to army to serve their country, as they said. Many countries, as Sossi said, they have conditions for army, but not even European countries have special beds and special rooms. So the country tries with its minimal resources to do that. And I think it is our role to help, to provide assistance and advice. What is happening now, just tomorrow, there is the CAF here in Armenia, a Swiss organization, and they are discussing how women, and its international discussion is going to be held, how better to incorporate women's rights into army. This is very interesting. Second issue, just in a short, because our time is short, I wanted to speak about women in the field. Because as we all know that there are many communities where there are local women who are in a very difficult conditions. They have been very poor before the war started, and that they have women who came from the border, refugees, displaced women, and women from the borders. So there are 4 groups of women who receive different types of assistance. It creates sometimes tensions between these groups. So we were trying to do now, we are creating a local plan of action on 1325, bringing all these women to discuss together their issue and present to the government. Because, in order to avoid these tensions, you have to try to find out where the problems are and try to bring these issues to the government for the attention. So this is for us very, very important. I think, whenever I see there are some problems, but I would not be so much critical, and because we are passing through a very difficult process, and it's very, very hard to address put all the points in the place. It's a process, similar as in many other countries. They try their best, but sometimes they are also open to discussion. And I'm trying always to use this opportunity to be heard. And I think that works out, specifically with the defense sector. I didn't try with diplomacy, though I was myself in diplomacy many years ago, but with defense sector, it works. And I would say it's very well.
Thank you, Gulnara. Luciana, you have some insight on the female service women, the women service people in the army that were the snipers, I would say. If you could share your experience with us.
Yeah, but I would also think as a mother, maybe if I am diaspora, but maybe if I was living in Armenia, I would say yes to having my 3 daughters, having 2 years of mandatory service, no front lines, just
Absolutely.
checking people if people are fit for health, being at offices. We are in an emergency period. The Karabakh issue is not finished, it's just beginning. We are having so many security threats in Armenia, and this is an emergency, this is an urgency. So I think everyone has to be there, everyone has to contribute for security, because I don't know, I cannot think of a bigger issue than security by now. Of course, this place, this and that, when we are discussing everything. So I would not have a problem. I have seen, as I was telling before, I have been seeing girls in checkpoints, girls at the doors, the entrance of Hezbollah tunnels, doors at the front of cultural places, girls at the kotel or whatever. So there are so many things that girls can do inside Armenia, in the borders or whatever, and not being at the front lines once again. So in my case, I would say yes to that. And regarding the combatants and the paramedics, yes, we have been, I think we can also include what Gulnara was stating about the hate speech, because what happened during September 2022 to these 5 ladies, at least we have 5 during the reports. And that's why I was also bringing out the good work of, at that time it was Christine Gregorian at the office of the ombudsperson. Now we have to point out the good work of Anahit, Minassian. as the follow-up, and also Siranush Sahakian for the representatives of the victims, and especially in Artsakh, Mary from the secretary, the assistant of the ombudsperson of Gagam's office, because she's trying to keep up the visibility. But going back to September 13, 2022, these 5 ladies suffered such an abuse, and looking at the close reports, it was like, really, it broke our hearts to see what they have done to the sniper, but not also to the snipers, but also to the paramedic ladies assisting at the front lines, and the hate speech combined, because the Yashma legend written on the tummy of our snipers, and the amount of violence, because symbolically taking out the eye of she closed in order to shoot. This is something that needs to have a lot of visibility in the world. We are not only on legal fields, which we are trying to bring these issues, and if Rome Statute works from May 2021, maybe we'll have the possibility of doing something in ICC. Okay, that's something that needs to be discussed. But we have to bring a lot of visibility at this.
Yeah, and thank you. And you mentioned the ICC, and I know Sheila has a lot of experience with accountability and justice for war crimes and crimes against humanity. Can you talk about some of the women's role in seeking accountability for what's happened over the last 3 years?
Yeah, I mean, so it should be, well, in Armenia per se, I wrote an article for EVN Report with the ICJ case. There was a certain stage for one of the provisional measures hearings where the entire Armenian side was just this like strip of white males, and it was so optically horrific because there were so many qualified women behind that, and like we know that, but and also it's just so tone deaf. This is like a case about discrimination at its core, and the Azerbaijani side had like, they were woke enough to have a gender balanced and diverse not bench, but sort of panel facing an increasingly gender balanced and diverse bench. The president is a woman, and she has made it very clear that she doesn't want to be facing this like all white men thing anymore. And we are, in that sense, I just thought, like Sossi was saying, that there are women, which it's true, that are behind the scenes, but are, an integral part of the advocacy and the process. But it's a problem that we're behind the scenes, because it means things take longer. If we're not in the position to make the decision, it's going to take another year or two before we get there, and so in the same way, and it's also just not fair. I mean, why should all these men be taking the credit for a lot of work that's being done by a lot of very like bright, intelligent, and deserving women? It's optically necessary so that it doesn't have a chilling effect. Like what we saw with when women are targeted in a certain way, let's say like the women snipers, and there's a certain gendered aspect of the violence that's perpetrated on them, it is because it's very easy to terrorize a population, especially women, by doing that. But by the same token, if you don't have women at the forefront of, not only the army, but decision making and high level positions, it has a chilling effect on a woman's perspective of feeling like they can be a meaningful part of the process. How many times are women not speaking their mind because they don't think that they should? So it takes that's what I mean by the walls that we have to climb are so much higher, and that's a waste of energy. That's a waste of very valuable juice and energy that we should be putting towards the security of the country, accountability. One of the reasons we're not able to get the kind of accountability that we deserve and that we need for so many reasons, including deterrence, is because we don't have as many resources. We don't have as many, we don't have the resources that like Azerbaijan has. Well, we have all these women who can contribute meaningfully, and they're not even feeling like they can be a part of the process. They'd probably be willing to do a lot more and for free, but only if they're taken seriously and that they're invited, and that they're respected, and that they're not treated as like just give me what you have so I can take it and run with it. Like it's not fair. That's what equality means. It's fairness, equality, equal opportunity. And so that way 50% of this population is not being like wasted like water or air or whatever. Like it's such a waste. So yeah, I mean there's pride to be taken in what we've done, but there's so much waste, I think, that we
Sheila,
can.
we had a question from the audience that sort of piggytails on what you just said, so I'll just bring that in there. Is internalized misogyny a factor in how women themselves view their participation in the security sector?
Probably. I mean, yeah, in the sense, I don't know about, yeah. I feel like misogyny is a strong word. On the part of men, maybe, like, I don't think, I think every panelist should answer that question. But I'm going to say like flat answer, yes, in the sense that I think a lot of women I've met here, it's not, it's not precluded to here, but just feel like their role is meant to be different than like the roles are very sort of clear cut, and that's sort of the majority of men and women will not take lightly to a woman trying to achieve more and more, you know what I mean? So, but I'm interested in the other panelists' views on that.
Like in my case, I feel like, again, I'm diaspora. I don't live in Armenia, but I believe that it took me about 10 years to be in a comfortable place now where I can get to the people I need to speak to, and maybe I am going to be heard. And maybe what I'm asking for is going to be done, or they are going to bring the necessary means in order to help us whether we are talking about legal actions or something. So my last trip was during October, and I came with a very comfortable sensation, feeling that things are working differently. But it took me like almost 10 years to get to this place. And again, almost 10 years ago, the situation was not about, and the outcome was not like this. We were discussing different things. We didn't have a good agenda for Artsakh. Now seeing it with the diary newspaper of today, we were discussing other things. We were discussing a lot of genocide. I mean, at least in the legal field. But the road took me to a place where I don't feel uncomfortable at all, and I think I can mingle with everyone, and I get to be heard, and all my requirements are trying to be fulfilled.
But it took you 10 years. Like, that's not okay.
It was also a learning process. It's not, you have to learn how to come from diaspora.
We need a head start. Like the boys have a head start.
And have empathy, because diaspora is not Armenia. So you have to understand, and sometimes you think white, but whenever you get to Yerevan or whatever parts of Armenia, you think, no, this is black, they were right. And you have that's why sometimes there are so many contrasts, and it's difficult for us to understand things. The last 3 years, I think many of us have been there working pro bono for whatever, sleepless, getting too affected, even attending doctors for this Artsakh issue. So we have been involved in a very sentimental way, not only professional way, but I feel very enthusiastic about our future. And what you were stating, I was also about the bench in ICJ. By the way, Sheila, you were the one sitting there during the first hearing of provisional measures, the first round. But then again, no one, and seeing Azerbaijan completely balanced, I was like, wow, what is Mrs. Donahue going to say about this? This is like total disaster. And I was at the proper office, like, you need to have balanced people in the bench, not only Pierre Dargent and this and that. So yeah, you're right. But I think that this is going to be solved in a short period of time.
I hope
We're
so.
here.
You know, in a practical, you know, we've talked about how there's a lack of women representing Armenia, and Sheila mentioned the ICJ, and Luciana talked about the ICJ. In a practical sense, where else is it, you know, bad where to not have enough women represented? In what way, you know, put it to us in practical terms, because we've talked ideologically about this, but, you know, give us maybe some concrete examples of where having women is a strength. It increases peace and security.
Like ambassadors. As I said, we have only, at least as of a year ago, it was only 1/5 of ambassadors have been women, and we have never had a deputy foreign minister. So for women, I would say it's rather a glass ceiling. For instance, I became a head of a section in the foreign ministry when I was 29, but I knew that is pretty much the ceiling. Few women become heads of departments. However, that's exactly where the career of women stops. And in the defense ministry, it's much worse, because there women get stuck in administrative and supportive roles, or they may have just roles in specifically female run departments, such as, for instance, integrity center, because the Ministry of Defense has an integrity center, which is a very important center, because that's exactly the center where the cases of bullying and maltreatment and human rights violations are reported by servicemen. However, when it comes to more typical policy making issues related to the defense sector itself, you will not find senior women. So again, I don't feel ignored in Armenia, not at all, at least not as a woman. I feel heard. I feel like I have a lot of opportunities to express my views, give TV interviews, take part in public discussions. So it's more about the glass ceiling. It's more about formal representation, because as Sheila said, it's good to be a civil society. It's good to be a backstage figure and contribute to policy shaping. But at one point you feel like, why I'm never in a lead role, you know? And this is not about ambition. This is actually reflected in statistical data, like gender gap data about Armenia. So women employment is very high. However, their representation is low.
And what does that representation being low, how does that affect Armenia's peace and security? Gulnara, you had your hand up.
Yeah.
You can jump in.
Okay, you know, I would also propose women to be in local governments, because with the new restructuring, we lost many women in local governments, and these women are very close to population. They can bring lots of problems. I've been myself one of the 13 governors in Yerevan for many, many years. And, you know, for me, I know how hard it was to raise the problems and to be heard. It cost me quite months to be heard. But then I felt that I can bring completely different problems to the table, addressing needs of a bigger population, addressing needs of a bigger social strata than men. So we are different in many issues. And having many women in local governance, you know, will help to understand the problems much better, and to design politics which address people's needs. Because now we have almost no governance, only one, not now, and almost no mayors of the communities. And this is critical, specifically when we speak about border communities. where issues should be addressed. Another important issue I wanted to address is, it comes from my old perspective, is the threat of human trafficking. I think Armenia should take it not as a human rights issue, but as a security issue. And I'm trying to address it many times because we have a problem of, first of all, Russian bodyguards in all our airport and everywhere. You know, we have our borders are not very much secure, and as everybody was raising issues in Ukraine, maybe working, human trafficking has been happening in Ukraine. So why shouldn't it be an issue in Armenia, and it should be addressed as soon as possible? Because there have been many cases of inviting people to go, and specifically women, to go to Russia to get a job. And there will be a better job in Russia. But from the other side, when you see what is happening in Russia, they left the, Council of Europe's resolution on minorities, which means that there is no protection of minorities. And these people one day might find themselves in the, trafficking field or in army. So this is an issue also should be addressed, when we are discussing important issues related to women.
Sorry, have there been cases, Gulnara?
What?
Have there been cases like that?
There have been cases of invitation of people, and people have left to Russia. But no registered cases, first of all, because there was no information campaign. People do not know what does it mean trafficking. There should be information education campaign there. There should be analysis conducted there, and recommendations should be based on this for the government. Nothing has been done.
And this is prevention work.
That's really
Absolutely, and this is a security issue.
41 the population comes of children and youth.
Absolutely, we mostly speak at it as a social issue, but it is not a social issue.
No, not at all.
Absolutely,
issue.
Yeah.
Even during a fact-finding mission last May at the blockade in Kornizor, we were at the Armenian Artsakh passport control on top of the hill and watching the checkpoint down there. And the people who came to ask us to please leave, were the Russians.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So
there have been another legal issue that some of the women who came after before the blockade, displaced women, they didn't have legal definition. What is displaced? There is no legal protection for these women.
We should also address the question that the passports of the Artsakhis women are only for migratory travel purposes, and their status is quite.
Absolutely.
And this is something that needs to be solved immediately.
I think this is a big conversation to be conducted.
Now, so this has to be stressed right now. They are suffering displacement, trauma, war.
I think this issue
and this is a good environment to be recruited.
Exactly.
This is clear environment to be recruited.
Actually, I think that this issue is going to be resolved because they should get a refugee status because they didn't have a full nationality. They didn't meet all the criteria of being an Armenian citizen. So it was similar to what UN was giving to Kosovans, like a travel document. And now the government has adopted a law on their protection. So they will receive a refugee status, which is very important for their rights to property and rights to return to Nagorno-Karabakh if they ever choose to. And then I assume
but it is not right to get a better life.
Right, but after a while, I'm sure they will be naturalized and become full Armenian citizens, of course, if they choose so, and I believe and hope that they will choose so.
I think this is a discussion that
we exceeded our time.
We can branch out different topics. I know that a lot of our audience wants to know what they can do to help, whether it's help women get into these roles or just help these crises. Luciana, you had something to say.
We have so little time, and I just wanted to speak about the mothers of soldiers and mothers of prisoners because this is a question that, like, every time I'm in Armenia, I'm visiting houses or Abovian Cemetery, Yarablu Cemetery, just in order to listen to them. This is not related to legal work. This is just about being a mother, being with a mother. And for example, there are so many little issues that would bring they would feel a little more calm enduring all this pain. Something like, for example, a mother just had in the school where the son used to attend, they, with the little amount of money, it's not such a little amount of money that they received from the government and some donors, they made a field, a sports field, whatever. And she only has the picture of her own son, the fallen soldier. And at the same school, there are other 11 heroes, but there are like in floor 4, and they are not entitled. She's not allowed to put the 11 pictures in the field next to the sun. This is something that also we are trying to help her deal with the pain. And this is something that such a little amount of help. We are not even asking for money. We are not even asking for a budget. We are only asking for some recognition. And I was thinking about, like, we have like 6,000 families of soldiers. By now, today there was another soldier who died, was killed. What about trying to get, because I see these mothers and this part of the society and the government from here, and these people suffering so much pain and being so alone here, just like a suggestion, trying to get some reconciliation commission or something, trying to engage the society and the government to these people. I feel them so left alone, so unattended, and it breaks my heart. And this is not related to legal work. This is something that we need to do, because they are not, this is not about money. Again, it's not about money. It's about being with them, trying to comfort them. Of course, the mother of the prisoners, they have a different problem, and maybe we don't have even legal tools in order to intervene in Baku. We are not Baku Lawyers Associations. We are not in that bar. Probably the solution will be political, totally political. This is another case, but this is something that we need visibility. And the last thing, and I will bring time, again, the assistant of Gayane, the ombudsman of Artsakh, the last ombudsman of Artsakh, was telling me today, and I wanted even kind of trying to quote her, that she's having less and less visibility every day. She feels like every day the people are forgetting about the Artsakh issue, that even her posts are having so less visibility, she's not getting awareness, she's like losing followers. And this is something that we could also try to work, because this is, for me, and I was telling her, this is just the beginning, just like Sossi was saying, there are so many things.
Who is her?
And Mary you can find it very black on Instagram, but she was the assistant of Gayane, the last ombudsperson of Artsakh. And it was so, like, it broke my heart again to see her destroy documents the last day before leaving Stepanakert, burning them. Okay.
So part of what people can do is to have more engagement. So is this something that, because it's easy to feel helpless from the diaspora. So what can we do? What can be done? I know that all of you have recommendations. Is there anyone that feels really strongly about something that they can recommend to our audience?
Yes, in fact, about refugees, their main issue is housing. Housing is a huge issue in Armenia, because it has become incredibly expensive, comparable with Western prices, largely also because we had an influx of 200,000 Russians starting the war in Ukraine, who came and settled down in Armenia. It's mostly middle class, IT, liberal professions, and they are anti-war. However, because they have rented so many apartments, the prices have jumped up, and now Artsakh people are not able to rent proper, decent apartments. And I'm not even talking about buying them. So I think that this can be something that diaspora can really contribute. I just thought about it. What if a fund is created specifically for contributions of diaspora to the housing issue for refugees from Artsakh? I think this is exactly the area where very tangible assistance can be provided and will reach the most vulnerable group of people.
Yeah, absolutely, I agree. Sheila, do you have any final recommendations for us, to our audience, how they can be involved?
How they can be involved?
Yeah, how they can help and ensure that women's participation is something that's paid attention to. You know, if they should follow people online or however they can engage.
No, I think it starts from within. And so I'm like, for whoever's watching, obviously there's already a sensitivity to the issue, and that's great. So I think the best thing everyone can do is like to be brave and not silence yourself, you know, like to be brave, and if you ever hear like a misogynistic joke, don't laugh, call it out. If you ever, you know, and encourage each other, encourage women to aim higher, fulfill their full potential. I know that this sounds like, oh, we know that, but do it. You know, do it every chance you get, support each other, because I mean it, the power of women coming together and working together is something so phenomenal, and it's in the little actions. So don't let those opportunities slip you by. You know, we all do our part to try to advance ourselves, but when we help each other, then we become unstoppable. So that's the best way. And I think that's easy. Like, it's maybe that's just such an easy thing to do, but seems so hard and not done enough. Yeah.
I like that. Gulnara, do you have any parting recommendations for us?
We can't hear you.
I think you're on mute. I'm going to ask her to unmute.
I'll return back to women, peace, and security. Takes us back because, you know, these are really important instruments. When I was teaching to some women in the military, they were saying, okay, you speak about strong instruments that have a criminal law language. And what happened to this woman who have been killed during the war? How we can respond to the situation, to such situations. So what I was saying, yes, we have these instruments, but these instruments needs to be used, first of all. Secondly, women have to be, now there is going to be prepared third action plan very soon. And I think we have to try to incorporate the needs which are in the field into the action plan and make it really implementable, not just a document on paper, which is usually we have in Armenia action plans, which are on paper with a very little monitoring. We have to have this document for people. And while government is really open to discussion, make it really, you know, our own document, not just document for paper, for a shelf.
Thank you, Gulnara. We look forward to the third National Action Plan to see some positive changes and strengthen the peace and security. I want to thank our panelists and thank you for sticking around 5 minutes extra. I admire you all so much. You're doing the work on the ground. You really are. And I encourage our audience to follow each and every one of them on their social media or wherever to see what they're up to and support their work. So thank you.
Thank you.
And have a great day or evening, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Much.
Thank you.
Thank you.